What's up, everybody? Invincible is back, and they are not messing around anymore. Before we get into my breakdown of the first 3 episodes, make sure to subscribe so that you're not missing out on daily videos here on the channel. But with that being said, let's get into the Season 3 premiere. The new season got started as Mark trains with Cecil, but with Cecil it's of course a test too. He fights the giant, flies through lava, flies to the moon and back at record speeds, and lifts an ice cap before using Donald's custom bench press. His speed is up 65%, his endurance 70%, and his strength has jumped a whopping 138% in training for the next Viltrumite threat, Conquest. But there's never a quiet moment in the Invincible universe as Dropkick and Fightmaster, two villains from the future, are stealing the Declaration of Independence. They're making quick work of that pair, with Rex pushing Mark to go after Eve throughout the fight until Multiple shows up thanks to his GDA source. He blames Rex for Kate's death, which we of course know was just more of her clones dying, not Kate herself, as Kate Zero was in hiding and allows the thieves to escape by drawing our heroes' attention. Mark starts tearing through his duplicates though, making way for the main one, and that's when Kate reveals herself with the Immortal. I also gotta give another shout out to Jason Mantzoukas, just like I did in my preview video, for his voice acting as Rexplode. He's absolutely hilarious. Then, in between seasons, Oliver continued to age up, and it's only been a couple months since Mark fought Angstrom Levy, but that Thraxan DNA has aged him like it's been years. He's got his powers now too, and traps Mark into training him because he was keeping those powers a secret from Mark and Debbie. After that, we get the epic return of Doc Seismic as he attacks the world's superhero community from his cell by communicating with his Magnemites and the other creatures that he's been commanding that spawn from Inner Earth. But despite all their technology, Cecil and Donald and the GDA don't know that's the cause of all these earthquakes that are happening when the heroes are being taken, but they do know that Oliver has his powers, as they're obviously keeping a very close eye on the Grayson family. While the GDA works to figure that out, we see Mark, William, and Rick enjoying a night out bowling, and the show actually changes this scene from the books. Now, I only bring this change up because, for me, it acted as a powerful driver to the beef between Mark and Cecil in the comics, but essentially, Rick doesn't go home with them in the books, as this scene was focused on him still being affected by D.A. Sinclair, where in the show, it obviously focused on Mark's feelings for Eve. It was still a good scene, but I do think it fit this portion of the story as Cecil goes to Debbie about Oliver's powers. Being who he is, he wanted to know immediately, and even though it had only been a day since she found out, he was still pissed. But she shuts him down, and their conversation is interrupted anyway as Cecil finds out all the heroes are gone except for Mark and Eve. Lucky for Cecil, they're together when he calls them in, and he calls them at the right time as Mark starts to blow it, mentioning future Eve told him to tell her how he feels. They find Seismic thanks to Robot's signal, and even though they've defeated him before, he leveled up as Seismic adds the pair to his collection. That forces Cecil's hand, and so he sends in Darkwing and some of the Reanimen that D.A. Sinclair has made out of fallen US soldiers. That works to save the heroes and capture Seismic, but it causes Mark to rightfully lose his mind on his boss. The catch is that only Mark knows about Darkwing and D.A. Sinclair and what they've done because Cecil Stedman is one sneaky little shit, and so he just looks insane. But at the same time, Mark's hypocrisy does start to show as he's pissed about them being murderers when he's fresh off of killing Angstrom Levy. Obviously, he didn't kill Angstrom, and it's very different situations anyways, as Sinclair and Darkwing are just lunatics, while Mark snapped when his family was threatened. But to Cecil, it's leverage over Mark after what his father did, which, speaking of Nolan, they gave us another tease of his prison break with Alan the Alien, which I do believe is coming in next week's episode, episode 4. But we've still got 2 more episodes to dive into as they really treated us to a special premiere. Episode 2 got started with a Cecil flashback as he fights Knucklebuster and Force Fist, gaining his iconic scar, which that's actually just the last of his original skin. I love this portion of the story we're coming up on with Cecil too, because to me, it highlights his soft side a bit more despite his ongoing beef with Mark and some of the sinister shit he does in that beef, and really, it just kind of balances his character more than the early stuff because you understand why he's doing this other than just being scared of Mark and Omni-Man. It also serves to show that he was once in the shoes Mark is in right now, as Knucklebuster and Force Fist end up working for his boss at the GDA, just like Darkwing and Sinclair work for him. Now, Cecil does take care of his too and goes to prison for it, but it was all meant to teach him how to do what's necessary, how to bring order to chaos no matter the cost. But that doesn't change the fact that Mark goes absolutely ballistic about Darkwing and the Reanimen, kind of real hard on that kind of pause, mirroring what his father did at the Guardian's base after he starts a fight with Cecil and the Reanimen in the White Room. That's because after Mark's trip to Atlantis, Cecil found his weakness and they planted an earpiece in his head that runs the same frequency as that beast that affected him. Lucky for Mark, Rudy's on his side, and so he gets that chip out of there and gets the help he was looking for. That fight then leads to Oliver's, let's say, alien side coming out as he thinks Mark should have just killed Cecil, while Mark, at this point, would only threaten to do so. It also forces Mark and Eve to talk, but he can't seal the deal on that just yet. That comes at the end of the episode, and it's not going to be a smooth journey this season, but it's going to be wild. Which, speaking of wild, Cecil loses 5 Guardians because of what he pulled, those being Rex, Ray, Rudy, Monster Girl, and Bulletproof, meaning that Samson, Immortal, Shapesmith, and Kate were the only 4 to stay, and of course Kate only really stayed because she's marrying the Immortal. Then over at Upstate U, Mark catches William and Rick up on everything Cecil's been pulling, including working with D.A. Sinclair, and he gets some much needed assurance from them that sparing Sinclair's life was the right move. On the flip side, Debbie, Mark's mom, is dating again, but Mark is not happy about that when he finds out that Paul knows everything about both him and his brother. That's a pretty minor concern for him though, all things considered, as Cecil gives the Guardians another member, Darkwing. We also saw Cecil's first day as the director of the GDA, obviously in another flashback, which happened to be either the day Omni-Man was either discovered by them or the day he arrived on Earth. But the best part of that scene is the motto Cecil has damned himself to live by: we can be the good guys, or we can be the guys who save the world. Alright, we got one more episode from the premiere, and it started with no dialogue, just music as Tether Tyrant and Magnum Maniac are trying to put their life of crime behind them. That's short-lived though, and they rob a bank after they're evicted, giving Oliver his first chance to throw some punches in a perfect opening scene. Eve, however, is taking a break from the punches and learning to be more efficient with her powers by going back to school. She runs into Amber on campus, and the two catch up and obviously have to talk about Eve and Mark being a thing now, which Amber actually already knows about thanks to William. Amber also has a new guy, Kyle, and if you haven't read the comics, I don't want to spoil it, but he and Mark have quite the first interaction, and I'm going to leave it at that. Anyway, we check in on the displaced Guardians as they relocate to the Teen Team hideout, and Rex, he's doing some growing up as he and Ray bond over their childhood traumas. We're getting the best of a lot of characters this season, but Rex is up there, so enjoy the hell out of his story because it's amazing. We also saw the return of Mr. Liu, a member of the Order who Titan doesn't want to deal with, but he has to now that he's been sitting in Machine Head's chair. Then back with the Graysons, Mark is finally training Oliver, and not only that, he takes him to art to get his first costume. The only problem is, he's calling himself Kid Omni-Man, and he got art to put the O on the suit, claiming it was for Oliver. Now, Oliver obviously didn't witness the atrocities Nolan committed on Earth. He knew his father, if he remembers him, as the monarch of Thraxa, kind of like how Mark looked up to his father until the day everything changed. A lot of things are changing in the Grayson family, though, as we get the scene of Mark and his brother walking in on Debbie, their mom, and Paul, her new boyfriend, macking on each other while they're in costume. They try to make up an excuse before they know he knows who they are, but their fight with Kursk and Furnace at the prison is pretty damning evidence, and it's on the news. But the news cameras aren't the only ones watching them, as a drone that's, spoiler, being controlled by Angstrom Levy watches Mark and Eve on the roof. Then, as if things couldn't get worse, the Maulers attack the same missile base that the Lizard League did last season and make quick work of the Guardians when they're sent in. That draws Mark and Oliver, well, Mark, but Oliver follows, and when Mark goes to stop the nuke, well, Oliver kinda sorta flies through the maulers, giving Cecil yet another thing to hold over Mark's head. But Mark's more concerned about what his brother just did than what Cecil will do with it, especially when Oliver starts saying their father was right. For one, it makes Mark uncomfortable that he even has the thought of agreeing with it, but he's also just concerned for Oliver's lack of care for human life. That conversation is interrupted, though, as most things are in the Grayson household, when Mark shoots out of the window to smash the drone that Angstrom is spying on them with. I thought that was an incredible premiere. They honestly could have just done the first episode, and I would have loved it. I would have been a happy camper, but I'm taking these three bangers as an apology for what they did in season 2 with the release bullshit, and it's happily accepted. Also, if you haven't read the comics, there's a war coming at the end of this season that's beyond epic, and the title cards are telling you what that war is. Just pay attention to them, and I also did mention it in my preview video, which I appreciate you guys so goddamn much giving that video a big boost as I push to get the channel monetized this year. Thank you. And so that'll do it for today's breakdown. I know I'm personally eating good with season 3 so far, but let me know what you thought of the first 3 episodes as well as any questions you have about the show down in the comments below, and make sure you have a great day.